My name is Brianne Roth. I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the Nantucket Historical Association. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today to our second to last Food for Thought for Spring 2016. As always, we would like to thank the MS Worthington Foundation for making Food for Thought possible, as well as our media sponsorship from Novation Media. If you all could please take a moment to silence your cell phones. We will have a Q&A after Joe Hale is done presenting today. Joe Hale is the newly selected Executive Director from the Dreamland Theater. In addition to his work at the Dreamland, Joe Hale serves as volunteer president of the Global Bright Light Foundation, an NGO that provides solar lanterns to off-grid families around the world. Prior to creating the Global Bright Light Foundation, Mr. Hale served as Vice President and Chief Communications Officer of Synergy Corporation, which is now Duke Energy. During his 14-year career at Synergy, he also served as President of Cincinnati Gas and Electric Company and of PSI Energy. Until recently, Mr. Hale was also an advisor to the chairman of Duke Energy. During the past 15 years, Mr. Hale has raised over $100 million for nonprofit organizations. He chaired the successful $37 million capital campaign for the striking new home of the Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center, designed by Zaha Hadid. He also chaired the $10 million campaign for the new Linder Family YMCA in downtown Cincinnati. He also chaired the search committees of the Taft Museum of Art, the Contemporary Art Center, and the Nantucket Theater Workshop, recruiting new directors. Mr. Hale received his Bachelor's of Arts degree from Hanover College and is a graduate of the Harvard Business School's Institute in Nonprofit Administration. He has received honorary degrees from Hanover College and the Columbus College of Art and Design. He is married to Linda Day Huff Hale, and they have 3 children. Please help me in giving a warm round of applause to Mr. Joe Hale.
Anyway, I really appreciate the chance to be here with you today. Being at the Dreamland a month now, it's a dream job to me. I started coming to Nantucket about 38 years ago at the invitation of a guy named Rob Benchley in Sconset. And Rob and I had worked together in a small town in Indiana called New Harmony, Indiana, which was the site of 2 utopian experiments in the early 1800s. A man named George Rapp, a man named George Rapp created a community that was basically religious-based, but it was also celibate, so it wasn't going to last that long. And after the Rappites moved on, a man named Robert Owen decided to create a center for education, science, and the arts. And he recruited the smartest people that he could find in New York and Philadelphia, and in Pittsburgh put them on a flatboat, and he called it the Boatload of Knowledge, and he floated it down the Ohio River. And when it came to the bend in the river near Evansville, Indiana, they got out and they moved to New Harmony. This was in the early 1800s, and the Owenites who lived there created a lot of firsts. The first exhibition for the Smithsonian Institution was actually organized in New Harmony, Indiana, and sent to Washington. The first co-ed kindergarten. It was the site of many, many firsts. But like many small communities like that, it fell by the wayside. And in the 1950s, there were about 900 people that lived there. There was really no industry there, and it was declining in population. And in 1960, a woman named Jane Owen, who was from Houston, Texas, married a 5th-generation descendant of Robert Owen. And she came to New Harmony on her honeymoon. And it was a pretty dilapidated-looking place, but she saw these wonderful homes that had been built in the 1820s, 1830s. And so she would promise kids in New Harmony a bike at the end of the summer if they would help her restore a house, which basically meant pulling down maybe old wallpaper and tearing off additions that had been placed on these houses. She saw the potential in this little town, and to make a long story short, in 1960 she commissioned Philip Johnson, the architect, to design a church for New Harmony, and he came up with his design, which was to design the roofless church in New Harmony. And she got Jacques Lipschitz to design a beautiful sculpture that was kind of the altar in this church. And all of a sudden, some people started coming back to New Harmony, and she saw the potential. And she had the head of the Ford Foundation come and paid him $50,000 to do a 6-week study of New Harmony, what needed to be done. And he fell in love with this little town and parlayed that $50,000 into $50 million over the next 10 years. And at that point, that's when Rob Benchley from Nantucket and Joe Hale showed up, and we worked for the corporation that was restoring this town. And ultimately, it ended up having 4 theaters and 12 museums and a wonderful inn and a couple of great restaurants, wonderful bookstore. And that's where I met Rob Benchley, and he said, sometime you've got to come to Nantucket. And I'd never heard of Nantucket. But a woman who had a farm outside of New Harmony, her name was Tish Mumford, her grandfather had been the governor of Indiana. And in the late 1800s, he had actually come to Cape Cod, and he bought the tip of Hyannisport. And they built their summer homes there, the big white house that you see when you take the ferry with the columns that's kind of on the tip there, and some homes around there. And the family still had some homes there, and so Tish said, if you ever get a chance after Labor Day and you want to use one of our houses, do that. And so we did, and drove out with our 2 little boys, and Rob called and said, come over to Nantucket, and that's how I ended up coming to Nantucket in the first place. I know I'm supposed to be talking about the Dreamland, and I just gave you a huge history of New Harmony, Indiana. I apologize about that. I know at this point probably know more about New Harmony than I do about the Dreamland. But in a way, the reason it's a kind of a dream job for me right now at the Dreamland is that when I was in New Harmony, I was responsible for kind of programming the town and making something happen in the 4 theaters and developing internship programs with about 12, 14 different colleges and universities to bring students into the community to make it a beehive of activity. And I do see some parallels now with the Dreamland. I want to talk a little bit about the history of the Dreamland, and I know there are people in the audience that probably know more about the history than I certainly do, but I think it's interesting to hear about the history of our organization, because it really goes back to 1830, 1831, when the kind of I guess the bones of the original building were constructed. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the Dreamland, but I spent my 20s in kind of the not-for-profit sector. In New Harmony, Indiana, I was a director of the Metropolitan Arts Council for the city of Indianapolis, which is the city's arts agency, and so worked for the Indiana Arts Commission, which is very similar to the Massachusetts Cultural Council that we have here in Massachusetts. And so I was really involved in a lot of programming, a lot of administration, arts management, that type of thing. And so it's kind of nice now to come back full circle and be involved in a cultural institution like the Dreamland. Everybody has their memories about the Dreamland. Everybody probably has their opinions of the Dreamland too. I hope that this afternoon we can just use the brief time that we have together, because I'd really like to hear some of your ideas, some of your advice, some of your counsel, as we look to really expand the variety of programming that you see there. Yes, we're a place for film. Yes, we're becoming known as a place for children's theater. But I think there are a lot of other possibilities at the Dreamland too, and I'd kind of like to hear your all's thoughts. But I might begin, though, just talking a little bit about, the history. It's really been a historic center for entertainment, but it's also been a historic center for a lot of other things. Like I say, there vaudeville and roller skating and straw hat making and a variety of activities. It really goes back to, as I said, 1830, 1831, the Hicksite Quaker Meeting House, which was built at that time for about $3,200. And this is the kind of the bones, if you will, of the original Dreamland. 1845, the Gurneyeites took over. It became, after that, a straw hat factory. In 1880, it was the Atlantic Hall, which was a roller skating rink here on Nantucket. In 1883, the building was dismantled, and it was floated over to Brant Point, where it was then integrated into the Nantucket Hotel. Here's a photograph of it starting to kind of being floated across the harbor to Brant Point. It was then reassembled there, and it actually became, if you look in the middle under kind of the N, the NAN, that's the Dreamland right there. That part of the Nantucket Hotel at Brant Point is the Dreamland. So it remained part of the hotel until December of 1905, when it was again dismantled from the hotel, floated back across the harbor to our current location, which is there. And you can see what the building looked like about 1905, 1906. Then it became a center for vaudeville, other types of entertainment, silent films, and then movies. And you can see in the next few slides how it kind of progressed. And I think it's just fascinating to see how the bones were always the same, but there was kind of, different lipstick was put on it occasionally by people. I love this, all talking, all singing, all dancing. So there was a lot going on at that point at the Dreamland, and it wasn't just film. I mean, there was a variety of entertainment at the Dreamland. Another shot of it a little bit later, close to what we know today. And then in 2005, 2006, as you all know, a couple of groups got together actually, and attempted to buy the Dreamland, and one group was ultimately successful and raised, some very generous people formed a board, the Dreamland Foundation, Nantucket Dreamland Foundation, and raised some money and restored the Dreamland to what we know today. And so I know you've all been in there, I hope, and many of you are members. If you're not, I'd ask you to become a member, because it does get you free popcorn and discounts on tickets to things. But anyway, I know you've probably been in here, but this is our main theater now. It seats 314 people. We also have the studio theater upstairs. That's kind of a multi-purpose room, if you will. We can seat about 125 in there for movies. I know it may not be the most comfortable place to watch a movie in the world. We've heard that feedback from a lot of people. But it is multi-purpose. This weekend, you can see Brother Bear, which is a show that we're producing, and it's for 1 to 6-year-olds. So it's very family-oriented this weekend. Next weekend, we're also going to roll it out again, Daffodil Weekend, and this summer. But this is also interesting because it's a real source of revenue for the Dreamland for events. And there are a lot of weddings, there are a lot of birthday parties, there are a lot of anniversary celebrations, that type of thing in this room, as well as the Harbor View room, which is in the back of the Dreamland, which I think has one of the best views in the town of Nantucket because it does overlook the harbor, and that'll hold about 85 people for an event when you spill out onto into the harbor. So that's a very brief history of the Dreamland. Like I said, I think everybody has their own memories and impressions of the place. I certainly do. 35 years ago, taking my kids to movies there and going to movies. I think the challenge we have today, quite frankly, is my vision for the Dreamland is that it becomes Nantucket's kind of small version of the Kennedy Center, the City Center in Boston, the Lincoln Center in New York, so that you can go and really experience a variety of activities there. And as I say here, we got film down, and there are a lot of wonderful films that are shown there. And I hope you have a chance to see not just the ones that we've all heard about, but there's a quirky one that's showing tonight. It's called Hello, My Name is Doris, starring Sally Fields. And it's gotten incredible reviews. She's being talked about as a possible Oscar nomination for this. But there are a lot of independent, small films that are shown there too, and in addition to kind of the blockbusters. Our children's theater is growing. 2 weeks ago, we did a production of Annie Kids, 8 performances. Nearly all of those were sold out. And it's a wonderful way for our year-round population. There were over 70 kids involved in that show. And the experience that they get by being involved in this is, through the audition process, through the rehearsal process, through the performance itself, is the confidence building that kids get to get up in public and perform, but also the time management to make sure that they're able to get schoolwork and everything else done. The experience, I think, brings a lot to each of their lives. We also have dance at the Dreamland. Dance performances during the year, everything from the Nantucket Ballet's recital to ballroom dancing. Lectures, I think you're going to hopefully see more lectures. We just finalized a series that is going to take place this summer beginning in May 31st. John Briglio is going to be speaking that night. He's got a new book coming out next month. It's called I Want to Be a Producer. John was one of the original producers of A Chorus Line. He's been involved in major Broadway productions, and this book it's kind of the ins and outs and a lot of little anecdotes about producing on Broadway. That's followed by our Nantucket Book Festival in June, so we're staying away from June. But then in July 22nd, Nat Philbrick's going to be appearing. He's going to be interviewed by Natalie Jacobson to talk about his new book that comes out in May called Valiant Ambition. In August, Ellen Hildebrand hopefully is going to be interviewed by Maureen Orth, who's going to be talking about her new book. Rob Cacuzo, who's a local Nantucket writer, and he has a new book called Tracking the Great Kumba, which is a fascinating story. And Rob's going to be talking about that in August. And then Wendy Rouillard, who does the Barnaby series, is going to do a family talk over Cranberry Weekend. So it's one, and then somebody, I'm sorry, and I can't remember his name, from the JFK Museum in Hyannisport is coming over to talk about a new book he's just written on JFK and the family and their time in Hyannisport. So again, these are going to take place at 5 o'clock. The authors will be available to sign their books afterwards, but it's just another component that we want to add to the Dreamland to hopefully bring another audience there. Recitals, I think you'll start seeing more and more small chamber groups, recitals at the Dreamland too, maybe on Sunday afternoons. Again, just trying to look at different types of programming. We've also talked about doing a series this summer called 20 Questions With. And we've reached out to people like Jack Welch, a former chairman of GE, to come in and just be interviewed on stage. First 15 questions are set, and then it's opened up to the audience to ask some of these kind of interesting people that we have on Nantucket about careers, about their lives. We realize that it may not draw hundreds, but I think it just adds to the variety of programming that we're trying to achieve at the Dreamland. You will see more concerts. In Sconset, there's a family called the Charnas family. Many of you may be aware of them. Michael Charnas is a surgeon in Boston. He's a concert pianist too. His wife plays the flute. One daughter plays the viola. One daughter plays the violin. His son plays the bass. One of the daughters is a rock and roll violist and kind of does a lot of very contemporary music. But as a group, they are just one of the most dynamic families or musical groups that you can imagine. So concerts by people like that, I think you'll see that at the Dreamland. We also want to host more seminars, kind of, I thought it'd be kind of fun to do. You're aware of TED Talks. I thought it might be fun to do ACT Talks. And again, people that are doing, inventing, thinking about really interesting things on Nantucket and just have them appear at the Dreamland. So it becomes a place of learning too, and you can go to the Dreamland. I want you to be able to go to the Dreamland and be stimulated, be provoked, be exposed to new ideas, have discussions, and then we've also thought about theater. Now, I also wear a hat as chairman, at least until October, of the theater workshop. So I certainly want to supplement and complement what the theater workshop's doing. We don't want to compete with them in any way. But this morning, for instance, I had a breakfast meeting with Mike Cozart at the Nantucket Public Schools about, perhaps we could do theater aimed at younger people, but done by professionals. And shows like Our Town, The Diary of Anne Frank, The Crucible, The Miracle Worker, that do involve young people, but they also have very important messages, I think, from The Miracle Worker with people with disabilities and overcoming those disabilities to Our Town, Life in a Small Town, to The Crucible, but integrate those performances into the curriculum and talk about why The Crucible was written. And Arthur Miller, it was, he was prompted by the McCarthy trials in the 50s to write The Crucible, which talked about what was going on in Salem, Massachusetts, much, much earlier. And I think there's also parallels, maybe some parallels politically to what's happening in America today. But we want to try to integrate whatever we do into the curriculum. So if we bring in the entire middle school to see the Diary of Anne Frank, the teachers can also talk about what was going, certainly what was going on historically at that time, but with the Nazi regime in Germany, what impact did it have on art? What impact did it have on the music that was being composed at the time? What impact did it have on the literature that was being written at that time? So I think by integrating that into the entire curriculum, you can use the arts to help teach a lot of other subjects in school. So we may do that. Maybe we'll partner with the theater workshop. That would be ideal, I think. But to do a show in the fall and a show in the spring, maybe the fall is aimed at the middle school, the spring is aimed at the high school, but something that really is useful to the schools and can be used as a learning tool as well as entertainment. So those are just some of the ideas that have been rolling around in my mind. Some people have called the Dreamland house rich and cash poor. Spent a lot of money building the building. And what we need to think about now, quite frankly, is a savings account. I'm not here to raise money or anything like that, but I think it's important to understand that. It's a very expensive building to operate. It's LEED certified. And that means it's probably, I think it's platinum level. It's the highest level of an environmentally friendly building that you can build. But as a result, it costs a lot more to operate a building like that. We're doing okay. I mean, we're fine, but it doesn't mean that we're producing a lot of revenue to take risk in programming, some of the things that I'm talking about. So at some point, I think we at the Dreamland are going to have to, take a hard look at really developing a savings account, if you will, so that if a system fails or X happens, that we've got something in the bank that we're able to handle that. That's one of my challenges facing me going forward. And I think a lot of the very generous people that created the Dreamland in the first place realize that they certainly don't want it to fail, and hopefully they will make those types of kind of legacy investments, if you will. But I also hope that through some of the programming that we're talking about here, we'll create more of a sense of ownership among the year-round population on Nantucket. And one of the things that literally I wanted your counsel and advice from this, some ideas that we might want to explore. We've got the ability to stream things in live, and if any of you have ever been to the Metropolitan Opera or the Bolshoi Ballet or the National Theater in London, you've seen what we have to offer there, and I think that is extraordinary. I mean, I was sure wasn't able to get to London last fall, but I was able to see Benedict Cumberbatch do Hamlet, which was one of the most astounding performances that I've ever seen. I'm not a huge opera fan. I like the opera okay, but I went to see Madame Butterfly on Saturday afternoon at the Dreamland. And Sunday at church, a couple came up to me and they said, Joe, we used to live in New Canaan, Connecticut, and we subscribe to the Metropolitan Opera, and we live here on Nantucket year-round now. We can't tell you how cool this is that we can now go to the Dreamland and see these performances, and we actually now have better seats than we did when we were subscribers, and we can see a lot better. But that stuff isn't cheap to bring it in. And so in some ways, I almost think we're going to have to take a PBS approach. I mean, last night driving home, I called, WCAI and made my pledge to the NPR, because I think it's real important. I don't listen to everything on NPR. There are some programs that I like, others I don't, but I think it's important to kind of have that voice and have that variety of programming available to me. So in some ways, I hope we're going to be able to position the Dreamland like a PBS, because you saw all the different things we're doing and thinking about doing, and I hope that we'll be able to listen closely to what the year-round population wants and needs. There have been many times when we've had a Met broadcast, quite frankly, or a Bolshoi, and there will be 3 people in the audience. It makes it tough to continue that. And so at some point, we're probably going to have some kind of underwriting for that. And maybe it's an endowment specifically for that. Raise $1 million, you invest that at 5%, that throws off $50,000 a year. That pays for that program in perpetuity. And, maybe it's important enough to somebody out there that they might want to do that. I don't know. I'm just using that as an example. Same thing with children's theater. I've invited 12 of the parents to have breakfast with me next Thursday just to talk about how we might grow the program right now, because we do charge tuition, but we also give a lot of scholarships. So if you look at it strictly on a profit and loss, the children's theater program loses money. And so we're going to need support for the children's theater program at the Dreamland too. And I think it's attractive to some donors, quite frankly. Partner at Facebook, he has come up with a new product called the living room or the screening room. And what that does is that you buy a box like, Apple TV or one of those, you buy a box, it's $150, you put it on your television. That allows you to, if Star Wars is opening tomorrow worldwide, you can have it in your living room tomorrow. You pay $50, a lot of money for the film, but if you invite 20 friends, then it kind of makes sense. But you have it in your living room the day it opens worldwide in the theaters. And so that's going to be very disruptive to this business, the film business. That's why this idea of more and more programming, a variety of programming at the Dreamland is so important to us, because I can't predict what the future is going to look like in the film business, but it's changing daily. Yes, sir, you had a question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. You mentioned about involving the local year-round community, and purely my own opinion of that is you have to look at it two ways. Number one, financial. You have to figure out a way. You mentioned that the summer supports you. Maybe a reduced rate in the winter would help fill up the movies. I've been in many a movie, 2, 3, 4 people, and I understand what you're saying. But if 2 people go, that's $20 to $25. And I think a lot of local people hesitate about going to do that. So you might look at a double-tiered ticket pricing on that. Secondly, the young lady over here mentioned about foreign films. I will climb on that bandwagon. I think foreign or art films draw a lot of people. And time again, you look at the weekly schedule, and you and the other theater in town are running the same movies over and over and over again. You need to spice that up, and I think some foreign and art films, maybe on a subscription basis, maybe not, would certainly help fill your theater more.
Are you able to go to the winter series that we co-sponsor with the Nantucket Film Festival? There was the Anderson Cooper, Gloria Vanderbilt documentary
Part of the time.
last month, and I think coming up is one called Weiner, about Anthony Weiner, which is supposed to be pretty provocative about his career and downfall and
correct, but
yeah.
Those are
You would
small,
like more of those.
Those are raindrops in the ocean.
Yeah,
those are real small numbers.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody else?
We have one right here.
Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to say, I know before you're kind of asking, but I personally, and for speaking for the people that work, a 9 to 5 job during the week, that some more matinees on Saturdays and Sundays would be great. That was one of my favorite things to do before I moved here, was to go to a $5 matinee at 11 or noon or whatever. And I think the ones you have are usually at 4. So maybe some earlier ones on those days would be nice. But one of the programs that I would suggest, I don't know if it's possible, and I've only lived here for 3 years, so I don't know if they did anything like this before, but I don't know if it's possible for you guys to simulcast award shows at the theater and do an event for the Oscars or the Grammys or something like that. Just an idea of a different program that might be fun to get in a different group of people that want to kind of watch it all together. You can make an event out of it. So.
Yeah, I was thinking because of our diverse population on Nantucket, and at my Cozart this morning in my meeting, he said that in the first grade there are, I think, 7 or 8 different languages that are now spoken in the first grade. it's their first language, and a lot of challenges for the teachers dealing with that. But I thought how cool it would be to have the opening ceremonies of the Olympics simultaneously broadcast at the Dreamland, and people could come and dress in their native costume and everything. I think that would be kind of it's one night, but at least it's one step at least in trying to provide more programming for the community. Now, I'm sure there's probably some kind of, copyright or infringement, or you can't simultaneously broadcast it to the public, and but maybe not. So it's something we're looking at. I think if you do those events and they're free and open to the public, you're fine. You can't charge for something like that. But I've also heard people talk about the Grammys, the Emmys, the Oscars, and some of those types of events where it's fun to just be with people. When I came and interviewed for this job, I've been about a 7-8 month a year resident, okay? And I'll be honest, have been following my wife to Florida. But I've always wanted to live here year round, and so this another kind of dream come true. But when I interviewed here, it was February 13th and 14th, and I don't know if you remember, it was like the coldest day in 64 years here with the wind chill. It was like, 60 below zero with the wind chill. It was crazy, crazy cold. And so my interview was on Sunday, and I thought, well, Saturday night, I've got to go to the theater, and I want to see who's there when it's 40 below wind chill. So I went to the theater, and of course, what was it called? Zoolander 2 wasn't exactly my first choice. That was what it was showing. So I walked in, and I sat in the second row in the back section. And there were two teenage guys in front of me, and they had the ledge in front of them. And they had like a fried clam dinner set out here with French fries and their Cokes and everything. And I said, what are you guys doing out tonight? Said, we love to bring dinner and come here. It's like dinner theater to us, and they were just having a great time. There was a older couple sitting behind me, and I said, hi, I'm Joe Hale, and, what brings you out tonight? And they said, we live here year-round. We live out in Nantucket, and we just want to be around people. You get to a point where you just want to be around people. And I thought, isn't that exactly what the Dreamland should be? A place where people can come together and feel like they're, around friends and around other people. I thought, that's just perfect, those two stories that I heard that night. So it kind of underscored my desire to try to get this job. And like I say, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world to have it.
We have time for one more comment or question if we have anyone else that has a question. Let me come over here.
This is actually a compliment. One of the things I really like about the Dreamland is as you are exiting, that you have your personnel saying goodnight to everybody. It's a really nice touch.
I'll pass that along. Well, again, thank you very much. Hope to see you at the Dreamland soon. We'd appreciate it.
Let's give a round of applause for Joe Hale. Next week, we have our final Food for Thought. We will have a local history Food for Thought. Marcia Bettman is coming, and she will talk about her family's summering out in Sconset. And so we hope to see you back here. And then we have yoga at Greater Light every Saturday in April. So thank you all for coming today.